Hi, my name is Karen Fabian and I'm the founder of Bare Bones Yoga, and I want to welcome you to video number 6 here in my free video series called the Learn Anatomy Challenge. I hope you've been following along and you've done all the prior videos. If not, you can always take a look back at the other ones. Also, if you haven't already, I'm sure you probably have by now, but if you haven't, download the PDF guide, which guides you through what you can expect from this training, what kinds of things you can learn, and what some of the benefits are of doing the training. And I want to remind you that as part of this training, which is really challenging you to not only learn anatomy, maybe for the first time, but also to challenge you to keep an open mind if you have been teaching for a while and you feel like you kind of have the information. So I'm challenging that person to keep an open mind to maybe additional things that you can pick up. As a participant in the challenge, you're eligible for an hour of free coaching from me, and this kind of thing can be used to answer your questions about anatomy. Maybe you've got some specific questions. Maybe you have some questions about teaching, creating sequences, different aspects of teaching like cueing. Maybe you've got some questions about how to start a yoga business as an independent teacher. So any of those, something else you might think of, all you need to do is send me an email, karen@barebonesyoga.com, and let me know that you'd like to take advantage of that free coaching session, and I'm happy to set that up with you. So let's get started on today's video. Today's video, and if you take a look at the PDF, you'll see what each video is going to cover. Today's video is going to cover demonstrating anatomy knowledge in the context of teaching. So all the prior videos we've done have walked us through a lot of the basics, and it's really a building block format. And I did it like that in person. I did it like that on purpose to give you the fundamentals and then bring us to a point where you're starting to apply that fundamental knowledge to teaching. Because let's face it, while there's a lot of information out there and you can dive into all the details, if you're not really able to pull those details together in an understandable way to share with your class, then it's really not going to be much help. The more you can do that, the more you can give your students information that they can use not only when they're in class, but when they're walking around in their day, doing different activities, doing other kinds of physical activity, other sports, going to the gym, and they can call back to some of the things that you've been teaching them that's grounded in anatomy. So this is why understanding this complex subject is so important and can be so helpful for your students. So today I'm going to talk about, for this part I'm going to refer to the anatomy manual. And I'm referring to this in all of these videos because all the topics really come from the way I've broken down this subject of anatomy for yoga. And these all are chapters in my anatomy manual. And this chapter here is practical application of anatomy to teaching. And I want to also point out here that all of this content and more is in my online course. And again, I really wanted to build different ways for teachers to learn anatomy. And so I created the manual, and then I thought, let me make this an online course with videos that are even more in detail than the ones you're seeing here. These videos here are really meant to be just a snippet, just a taste of what the information is. And if it piques your interest, and if you feel like I'm a helpful teacher for you, if you feel like this format is helpful, video versus just reading, then the online course is going to be perfect. It's called Your Yoga Anatomy Blueprint, and you can link to that right off of the PDF guide. So let's get started. So I want to point out two specific things that will give you as a teacher a great way to share your knowledge of anatomy, and will give your students some really practical information that they can use. So the first one has to do, you can see the picture here, the first one has to do with hip flexors and lunges. And this starts to get into this idea of the anatomy of the hip and some of the challenges that people can experience when they come to yoga class. So we've talked about in an earlier video some of the anatomical actions that the joints take when we're in different poses. So if we look at a posture like Warrior One, what position is this hip in? I'll give you a second. So if you said extension, you'd be correct. And what position is this hip in? If you said flexion, you'd be right. So, and then of course we do it on the other side and it's switched. So what is one of the major, there's actually two major ones, major muscles that flex our hip? I'll give you a minute to think. So two major muscles that flex our hip are the psoas, which starts on the lumbar spine and ends on the thigh. And also another one that people don't often think about is the rectus femoris, which starts on the pelvis and ends on the knee. And that's part of the four-part muscle called the quadriceps. And these muscles are responsible for flexing our hip, bringing the thigh closer to the belly. And when we do a lot of passive sitting, the muscle can get a little tired and weak. When we do a lot of active flexion, like in running or cycling, it can get short and contracted. So when we come into a pose like warrior one, we're asking this hip to be an extension. So we're asking those muscles to lengthen. But if they're shortened and tight or shortened and weak, it can be a problem. So what that oftentimes looks like when people come into the pose is something like this. So we're asking this muscle to lengthen. It's too short. It's pulling on the lower back, which in the case of the psoas is its origin. And so it's going to posteriorly tilt or tip the pelvis of the client, the student, forward. So what's a really common thing that we could ask this person to do to bring them more upright rather than tipping forward? I'll give you a minute to think. Well, the most common thing would be to have them bring their back foot in. As soon as they shorten their stance, they're better able to work with the limitation in the hip flexor. So now they can stay more upright as they come into the pose, right? As soon as they start to bring their foot forward, they might find that the tailbone hyperextends, which is a really common kind of scenario for someone with tight hip flexors when they try to lunge. There is another thing that kind of changes the pose a little bit more, kind of brings it into another kind of shape, but it can be really helpful, and that's lifting the back heel. So in a pose like crescent lunge, I'm still lunging, so I'm still getting the stretch of the hip flexor here, but I don't have my back heel down. So now I'm better able to center, and now I'm also with a little bend, a little contraction of the hamstrings here, I can also come a little more vertical rather than asking this leg to be totally straight, tipping me forward again, right? So this anterior tilt here is part of that sign, anterior tip of the tilt of the pelvis forward, is one of those signs that their hip flexors are tight. So again, if I bend and then lengthen a little more naturally through the spine, right? I'm not rounding, I'm not bowing, I'm just lengthening naturally, taking the arms up. Now I can work with any limitation in length here. So another scenario where you can really help your students out is when they move from high to low push-up. And this has to do with working more, of course, with the muscles of the upper body and really trying to trigger one muscle while, in a way, not really using another muscle. And so for this, I'm going to turn the skeleton around. So what we're trying to do here is use more of our serratus anterior, which keeps the muscle, keeps the shoulder blades flat to the back. I don't really want to use the upper trapezius, which elevates the shoulder blades. So in order to do that, I have to teach my student how to move from high to low push-up without elevating, which looks like this. So using more of the hugging of the shoulder blades to the back rather than elevating the shoulder blades up the back. And a great way to do that is to put them in plank and have them get that sensation just by taking a little bit of a push down and a rounding of what it feels like to have the shoulder blades glue onto the back and kind of wrap around the sides of the body versus something like this. And one of the things that they need to do is push down as they lower, as well as hug the elbows in. If they don't push down and they collapse with the elbows going wide, you can see how that scenario creates all that instability. So as a teacher, one of the most helpful things you can do is to cue your students as they lower to press into the floor to resist it as they draw their elbows towards their sides. So press down to resist, draw the elbows in. Another really helpful cue is to get them tapped into the legs. When they flex the feet and press back through the heels as they lower, that'll help them integrate the stability in their lower body with the strength of the upper body, kind of spread out the effort of the pose from more than just the upper body into a little bit of the lower body. And then they'll be able to do it with a little more of a smooth process, a little more of an integrated movement. So if you look here at my feet, as I lower down, my heels press back. It's not a sleepy kind of thing. It's a very steady shape. So the leg is very firm. So those two scenarios, even if in the case of high-to-low push-up, even if you never got into saying serratus or trapezius, if you just cued them as to the actions, that's really what they need to know. But this is a perfect example of an opportunity for you to share the names of the muscles. I mean, are they going to go around talking about serratus anterior? Probably not. But trapezius is a pretty common muscle. And even if they're not going to use it in their daily conversations, how great is it to educate people about what these muscles are? I mean, I can tell you, in my conversations with teachers, with students, most people, when they talk about rotator cuff injuries, think of the rotator cuff as one muscle. It's four. So, you know, when they say, oh, my rotator cuff is torn, well, the better question is, or a question, an important question is, what muscle of the rotator cuff? So this is where we can start to just educate people about the muscles in their body, the actions that they take, and how to use these muscles in a helpful way when they are on the mat practicing. So, just again, quick reminder, the anatomy manual, this is one resource for you. You can purchase this right on my website. The online course, your Yoga Anatomy Blueprint, you can also purchase that on the website. So if these videos are giving you a taste of the information and you're thinking, this is definitely, you know, more of this, yes, I definitely need this to help me bring my teaching to the next level, go and get the online course. And then the last thing is, let's say you're unsure and you want to have a conversation with me about which thing would be better for you, or you have some other questions about anatomy, you want to see if they're covered in the products that I have, or you just want to have a conversation about teaching, starting a business as a yoga teacher, or anatomy. You can send me an email and we'll set up that individual session. And again, the website is barebonesyoga.com, so barebonesyoga.com, and the email is karen@barebonesyoga.com. So I hope you're enjoying this series. We've got 2 more videos to do, and if you have any questions about them, just put a comment on the video here and I'd love to respond back and let you know. All right, so thank you so much for watching, and namaste.